Hi everyone, welcome to this session on post 1980 Indian writings in English. In this session, we'll be dealing with a brief survey of post independence Indian English poetry, its various features, and also we'll look into the contributions made by some of the major poets of this time. Now, please don't limit your survey or studies of the history of Indian English poetry to this lecture alone because this is a very brief survey. Okay, now let's begin. You all are aware of the fact that Indian English literature began as a byproduct of an eventful encounter of the late 18th century between vigorous and enterprising Britain and a stagnant and chaotic India, which means Britain colonized India and we were under their control. And it was at this time English language was getting more importance in a country like India. So what happened is India gave wealth and empire to England. That is, England took our wealth and empire forcefully, and in return, India received English language and the concept of constitutional government. And in the later years, it became a boon. As you all are familiar with that, I'm not going into the history of this now. We'll just go through the important points. Today, India not only remains a member of the English speaking world, we have Indianized version of English, but also contributed to a distinct genre of English literature called Indo Anglian literature. In the earlier times or earlier period, Indo Anglian literature was considered as a literature which is of low standard, which was considered something secondary, and it was not given much importance until Iyengar traced a history of Indian English literature. So now Indian English literature or Indo-Anglian literature is occupying a prominent place among the world literatures of the world. So this is how we achieved a prominent place among the world literature. Now, as per K.R. Srinivasa Iyengar, types of literature under Indian writing in English was categorized into three. And I know you all are familiar with this, but still I'm just briefing it. There are three types. One is Indo-Anglian literature, the second one is Anglo-Indian literature, and the third one is Indo-English literature in translation. The term Indo-Anglian literature is used to denote original literary creation in the English language by Indians. So Indo-Anglian means this literature is created in English language by Indians who are born and brought up here, whose ancestry belong to India. Today, there are a large number of educated Indians who use the English language as a medium of creative exploration and expression of their experience of life. Now, their writings have developed into substantial literature in its own right, and it is this body of literature which is referred to as Indo Anglian literature. And some of the famous writers whom you are familiar with are Thoreau, Tagore himself, then Kamala Das, A.K. Ramanujan, Nizam Ezekiel, etc. etc. Okay, now let's see Anglo-Indian literature. So this is used, or this term is used to denote the writings of English men in English about India and Indian life. So these people fall under two groups. One, those with mixed Indian and British ancestry, specifically English, and people who of British or English descent, born or living in India. Okay, so they'll have a British connection in one way or the other. For example, Ruskin Bond, who is of British descent, then George Orwell, Rudyard Kipling, who was born in India, then E.M. Forster, who is a British, but he writes about India especially. Now, their works are also significant as they serve to interpret India to the West. But their presentation of Indian life is more romantic than realistic. So that is the difference between Indo-Anglian literature and Anglo-Indian literature. They tend to romanticize the literature. Okay, that they tend to bring about a more favorable and truthful image of India to the outer world. So that's what Indo-Anglian literature does. Now, Indo-English literature in translation, as the term states, it's the translated works from other regional languages in India into English. This popularizes the regional literature in English, and it gives a wide range of readership, not only in India, Indians, but even outside India as well. For example, Tagore's Gitanjali was translated from Bengali into English, and you know O.V. Vijayan, he's a Malayalam writer. His novels were translated into English by himself, and then you are very familiar with K.R. Meera. Her work Arachar was translated into English, that is named as Hangwoman, and this was translated by J. Devika. Then Premchand's Godan, you might have studied these works, and there are several other works which gets translated from regional Indian language into English, and this adds to the her literature or the wealth of literature. So, thus, these three terms are very important. But nowadays, in contemporary India or in the post 1980 era, these terms are of no importance, because now these three terms have amalgamated together under one label. It is like Indian writing in English or Indo-Anglian literature. So now every literature produced in India is under one label, that is Indian writings in English or Indian uh, Indo-Anglian literature in English, or etc. So this is all about the types of literature under Indian writing in English. Before proceeding further, let's see how poetry are categorized in Indian uh, literature. The bulk of poetry written by Indian writers in English fall into three phases. One, the imitative phase; second one, the assimilative phase; and the third one, the experimental phase. So writers of 1850, that is 1850 to 1900, belong to the imitative phase. They were trying out newfound possibilities of feeling and form and expression. They were leaning heavily on the Romantics and the Victorians. Their main aim or their main content, or they aimed at self-expression, and that was important to the poets of this phase. Torudat is a good example, because in her works you could find an influence of Wordsworth, and there are many other writers. Now, the writers of 1900 to 47 belong to the assimilative phase. They were compulsive nationalists seeking to project the consciousness of India, caught in the swirl of historical conflict and turmoil and change, and culminating in the attainment of political freedom in 1947. So you could find patriotic poetry mushrooming during this time. The early poets were projecting landscapes, moods, fancies, and dreams, while their followers, that is, the poets belonging to the assimilative phase, sought a more radical assurance of their sense of origins and their sense of destiny. That is, genuine self definition accompanied by heart searching probing into cultural heritage. So that was what you were finding in the writings of the poets belonging to the assimilative phase. Now, the third one is the experimental phase, which we are focusing on. It began after independence. There has been a conspicuous outbreak of poetic activity demanding the urgency of national self definition and reflecting a painful heart searching. And in their works or in their poetry, you could find the traumas of political partition, the death of Mahatma Gandhi, and the precarious nature of contemporary existence. And they have forced our writers to go back to the first principles, that is, root causes and primal experiences. Then the rapid urbanization and industrialization of the country also has focused attention on the problem of cultural identity and on traditional values in relation to changing realities, both in our society and in our cultural personality. So this implies the development of diasporic writings. Apart from the sociological awareness, there have been new influences from the West, like existentialism, positivism, phenomenology, surrealism, and the new aesthetics. So, you could find a shift in the experimental phase, as the title suggests, that is post-colonial writings and the diasporic writings, which is part of the post-colonial literature, uh, reflects this experimental nature, which shifts from the traditional or earlier way of writing. Now let's make a comparison between pre-independence literature and post-independence literature, especially how what is the difference between these two literature. So you can see pre-independence literature, even in poetry, as I said earlier, it is more romantic. It's based on mythology. It used to be idealistic and nationalistic. But post-independence literature or poetry are more realistic, more rooted in the present, and they discusses about everyday lives of people, and it has a concrete style of writing, that is they write free in a free manner. Then it's more secular and more democratic. So this is the difference, basic difference between pre-independence and post-independence poetry or literature. Now let's see what are the features of post 1980 Indian writing in English. Post-independence era witnessed the most crucial developments in literature. You know that it is an experimental way of writing, so definitely there are changes in the way of writing. Then it marks a decisive break with the tradition established by the pre-independence poets through thematic and technical innovations. So you could find a great shift in the writings of post 1980 writers, be it poetry or novels or drama, whatever it is. Now, there are three major characteristics which you can find in post 1980 Indian writing in English. One is a past oriented vision, which means it is associated with a sense of loss and hopelessness. A sort of cultural pessimism can be seen in this writing, though they say that they are looking forward into what's happening in India. There is a kind of orientation towards past. Then next one is a future oriented vision, which means it's associated with a desire to remake the world. That is from they want to rebuild the world from the shattered state. Okay. And the third one is a present oriented attitude. It could be historical, moral, neutral, stoic, ironic, ambivalent, or absurdist. That is, this is what you find in today's literature. You could find a kind of what to say, absurdity or positivity or pessimistic way of writing. You know what are the features of post-colonial literature, right? So those things, the present condition, what are the realities, these are being expressed in their writing. Now, major features of post-independence poetry. These poets have freed themselves from the clutches of Englishness, and they have started writing in a very Indian manner. Nizam Ezekiel's a very Indian English literature, or Goodbye Party to Miss Pushpa. These works are best examples for this. So they Indianized the way of writing. Okay, they have developed an idiom of their own, a kind of poetic language in which the Indian mind can be best expressed. One of the critics, that is Bruce King, rightly says, uh, I quote his words: English is no longer the language of colonial rulers. It is a language of modern India, in which words and expressions have recognized national rather than imported significance, alluding to local realities, traditions, and ways of feelings. Such Indianization has been proceeding for several generations. So, unquote, this is what Bruce King says, that Indian English is not the only is not the language of English people or the colonial rulers. Instead, English is a language of modern India where they are free to express what they feel to the world. Okay. Then another important feature is the rise of female poetic voice in this era. That is, many female writers came into the forefront and they started contributing significantly to literature. So these are the basic features of post-independence poetry, and also there is an attempt to evoke an Indianness in their way of writing, expression of the experience of alienation and exile. Then you could see loss of values, as I said, in the past division, then breaking down of family traditions. It is intellectual and uses irony and satire, sarcasm and symbolism. Then uses free verse, freer rhythms, etc. Then poetry are written in a clear, precise manner from the point of view of a sarcastic or ironic speaker. Okay, so these are the major features of post-independence poetry. Now let's discuss some of the contributions made by the major poets of this era. Now the first poet is Shiv K. Kumar. He was the first major poet of the post-independence era. He was born in Lahore in 1921. He is a poet, art critic, philosopher, prose writer, novelist, teacher, humanist, realist, satirist, nationalist, and administrator. He has been called the most academic of Indian poets as he was involved in teaching, literary criticism, and creative writing. Apart from that, his poetry carries a kind of central quality which one finds in many great Western poets like T.S. Eliot and Ezra Pound. And also, you can find elements of autobiographical and confessional modes in his writings. Besides, he is a poet with a different sense. In his poetry, you can see the experience of being Indian instead of the experience of feeling like an Indian. And this sense of Indianness is especially seen in his poems like Indian Woman, Kali, Wool Gathering, etc. Apart from that, his poems have appeared in journals like Ariel, the New York Times, Quest, Western Humanities Review, etc. Now, besides all these, he has produced 4 volumes of poetry, like namely Articulate Silences, Cobwebs in the Sun, Subterfuges, Nude Before God, Trapfall in the Sky, and he also has won Sahitya Academy Award in 1987 for his work Trapfalls in the Sky. Now let's see who is P. Lal. P. Lal is more than a poet. He is well known as a man who organized Writers' Workshop. He founded Writers' Workshop in Calcutta in 1985. He played a vital and creative role in popularizing post-independence Indian English poetry by giving preference to experimental works by young and unpublished writers. And this became a publishing company that published a lot of new writers of that time. So this is the major contribution of P. Lal, who is known as whose actual name is Purushottam Lal. And another important writer is Nizam Ezekiel. He is one of the foremost Indian poets writing in English, and he has attracted considerable critical attention from scholars both in India and abroad. And this outstanding poet of the post independence India was born in Bombay in 1924. He is Jew by birth, but he has made India his homeland. He is the first to publish a collection of poetry. A Time to Change is his remarkable collection of poems of a young man in his 20s, and this appeared in 1952. Then this changed his vocation from philosophy to poetry. Then he has received Padma Shri, India's highest civilian honor, in 1988, and he also has received the Sahitya Academy Award in 1983. Then he passed away in 2004 because he was suffering from Alzheimer's disease for the last few years in his life. Then major themes discussed in his poetry are or which was a part of the evolution of his genius, where themes of alienation, which was central to his work, and that colors his entire poetic universe. He also considered poetry to be a way of life, a continuous flow, something which is an integral part of life. All his poems are related to one another in some way or the other, and you could see a poet's frustration and his quest for identity in his poetry. And also, he brings out his social concerns, his social ideal, his genuine sympathy for the tormented and suffering humanity in his poetry. Then also, you could see that he constantly moves between two poles. That is, one is quest for personal identity and concern for the people. So, in short, you can say that his poetry reveals a gradual evolution of his art and a genius, and describes love, loneliness, lust, creativity, and political pomposity, then human fibers and the kindred clamor of urban dissonance. Okay, so in short, Ezekiel believed that, I quote, all art is based on the conflict and contrast of opposites, unquote. And the poet should try to show how these opposites can be reconciled. Besides all these themes, you could find the theme of meditation and prayer in his poetry. Also, Ezekiel's quest ever was for harmonizing the religious and secular elements. And apart from all these, he has also raised his voice, which depicted the concerns of urban life and its problems. And some of his collections are 60 Poems, 1952, The Third in 1959, The Unfinished Man, 1965, The Exact Name in 1965 again, and Hymns in Darkness in 1976. Besides these collections, he also have edited the journal Quest. Now let's see who is A.K. Ramanujan. A.K. Ramanujan's full name is Alippat Krishnaswamy Ramanujan. He was born in Mysore. He was a bilingual who wrote both in Kannada and in English. And some of his finest works consist of translations from Tamil and Kannada into English. Then he was voluntarily an exile from India, stayed for 15 years in the US, and his essentially Indian sensibility has enabled him to go to India's past, and his sense of Indian history and tradition is unique, and that's what you find in his poetry. That is, his poetry draws its energy from his intense awareness of his social burden, that is, his Hindu heritage. That is, the past comes to life in his poetry, and the presence of the past might not have been possible had he continued to live in India. Then Most of his poems are the experiences of an expatriate remembering his past and colonial identity. He writes in a peculiar style that blends the traditional and the modern. A.K. Ramanujan's art is almost perfect, but the only fault that can be found with him is that his poetic output is too thin. He has, to his credit, only two slender volumes of poetry, as you see here, The Striders in 1966 and Relations, Poems 1971. And his forte seems to be translations from Kannada and Tamil into English, and these are the Interior to Landscape in 1967, No Lotus in the Navel in 1972, and Speaking of Shiva in 1972. Apart from writing poetry, A.K. Ramanujan has also translated U.R. Anandamurthy's Samskara from Kannada into English, which is a very famous work. He has written studies of literature and folklore. In a way, he was also an important folklorist. Besides all these, his poetry is rooted in the family, and therefore, deep emotions, fineness of preparation, and sense of rhythm make him indisputable among all his contemporaries. So, this is the contribution of A.K. Ramanujan. Now, let's see who is Jayanta Mahapatra. He is also a bilingual. He writes both in Oriya and English. He has the distinction of being the first Indian English poet to have received the Sahitya Akademi Award in 1981. He is a landscape poet. He has written a lot about the landscape and social life in Orissa. He has used surreal and very disturbing elements that evoke mental picture of psychological and social traumas, metaphysical traumas, etc. And he ultimately talks about human experience in a postmodern way. In his poetry, one may find him singing of the hearts and minds of many things in the universe on the basis of his sincere love for all creation, poverty, deprivation, and social injustice. So, besides all these, he established and edited a well regarded journal, Chandraprabha. His poetic trajectory has been an unusual one. A college teacher of physics throughout his working life, he came to poetry late as he was approaching 40 and in a state of isolation that was both cultural and geographic. The late start has not prevented him from becoming the most prolific and perhaps most written about of all the post independence Indian poets in English. His major works are Close the Sky 10 by 10 in 1971, Swayamvara and Other Poems in 1971 again, A Reign of Rights 1976, Waiting 1979, Relationship 1980. He has an admirable colloquial style punctuated by the power of striking images. To conclude, the sheer energy, determination, and commitment required to carve a literary career out of his promising beginnings are remarkable. Next important poet is R. Parthasarathi. He is a Tamilian and he lived abroad in the US. He's a poet and an artist equally obsessed with his native heritage. He wrote a famous book, Rough Passage, in three parts, that is, Exile, Trial, and Homecoming. The part Exile dwells upon the question of language and identity, and the impulse to preserve is at the bottom of the part Trial, and Homecoming explores after the torturous labyrinths of solitude and disillusion, the sense of finally coming home. So it attempts to communicate the burden of his Tamil and pan-Indian past. Okay. So his Rough Passage, which was published in 1977, is an attempt to deal with the theme of identity exposed to two cultures, the Indian and the Western. Above all, it attempts a redefinition of himself as a Tamilian. what it means to be a Tamil after having word after English God. In his own words, you can say that is, you can quote it as like this: "My tongue in English chains," is a theoretical statement of that problem. So, precision, economy, and the use of domestic imagery that are the chief qualities of his poetic technique. Next poet is Dominic Francis Moray, who is popularly known as Dom Moray, a Goan Christian. He is the first of the new poets to win recognition in England. Then his poetry is persistently confessional in tone and is obsessed with loneliness and insecurity. His verse has the strong imaginary quality as well as easy, redefined, and controlled flow of language. And it said that he went 17 years without a poem, which makes it one of the longest blocks in the history of Indian poetry. But Adil Jaswala's block lasted for 35 years. So during the years when poetry dried up, there was a constant stream of journalism, autobiography, travel writing, and commentary in his writing career. Um, his life is defined by loss, dislocation, and disillusion, but the only thing he never lost faith in was poetry. And he has written an autobiography, My Son's Father. His major collections are A Beginning in 1957, Poems 1960, John Nobody 1968. Next important poet is Adil Jaswala. He is one of the leading Parsi poets. He was born 7 years before Salman Rushdie. Then he views the contemporary Indian scene through the compassionate eyes of exile returning to India after a sojourn of more than dozens of years in England. Land's End 1962 is his first collection. It contains poems written in England and some part of Europe. And his other important anthology is New Writings in India, which was published in 1974. And his second book of poems is Missing Person, which was published in 1974. He did not publish in the collection for 35 years. That is, he had writer's block for around 35 years. He has also been a prolific prose writer. He wrote two unpublished plays in the late 50s, that is Jian, Jian, Jayan, and Floodwaters, and worked on unfinished and partly autobiographical novel Dolly Cobra in the 70s. Later, somewhat like Nazim Ezekiel, he has become a kind of mentor or father figure for a lot of aspiring poets and writers. On the whole, as a review editor, journalist, anthologist, or a charismatic teacher, and founder editor of two small presses, namely Clearing House and Praxis, Juswala gave voice to others. He became a facilitator, a commentator, or a translator of their words. This is all about Adil Jaswala. Next important poet is Jeev Patel. This is another leading Parsi poet. Um, Though an outsider, he prevents his alienation, freezing into indifference and producing a feeling of rootlessness. Being a medical practitioner by profession, he is familiar with pain, disease, and death, and is able to establish a kind of bond between himself and underprivileged. His poetry are mostly situational. He begins with a concrete real life situation. He has little use for image and metaphor and generally expresses himself in a bare space and colloquial style. Notable works are Poems 1966 and How Do You Withstand Body in 1976. Like Daruwala, Jeev Patel did not spend any significant amount of time abroad. Instead, he discovered and nurtured his own particular form of exile as a member of an ethnic and religious minority and as an Anglophone, entirely at home in the city he first depicted as Bombay and that has since been recast as Mumbai. So, this is about Jeev Patel. Uh, Next important writer is Keki N. Darwala. He is another important Parsi poet. Uh, a police officer by profession, he understands his response to men and matters. With a trained eye, he observes the Indian scene, but cannot remain absolutely detached. Deprivation and misery, disease and death move him acutely. His views of both Zoroastrianism and Hinduism, marked by skepticism tempered by a lively human curiosity, and this can be seen in his works. He is neither a city nor an urban poet, but a traveler across various landscapes, real as well as historical or mythological. Although critical attempts to cast him as a landscape poet have been largely reductive, if not misleading. Um, then he uses a lot of violent surreal imagery in his poetry. His major works are Under Orion, Apparition in April, Crossing of Rivers, Winter Poems, The Keeper of the Dead, which won Sahitya Academy Award in 1982, then Landscapes 1987, Night River in 2000, and The Map Maker in 2002. So, in short, his was one of the longest and most productive literary careers in contemporary India, comprising 12 collections of poetry, 4 books of short stories, 2 novels, 1 travel book, and an influential poetry anthology. Now, let's see who is Aravind Krishna Mehrotra. He's a famous author who is known as A.K. Mehrotra. Image is all dominant and he experiments in surrealism. By mixing images in his poetry, the poet tries to express his response to the modern man's predicament in a world of debased values. And he has also written History of Indian Writings in English, and in which he talks about 12 important poets. So he's a theorist as well, or is a critic as well. Okay. Now, his works include Bharat Mata, a prayer, woodcuts on paper, poems and poemas in 1971, 1973, and 9 enclosures in 1976. The Absent Traveler, Prakrit Love, Gada Saptasti of Satvalva Hala in 1991. Next important writer is Pritish Nandi, another significant poet of this era. He has more than a dozen collections, including Gods and Olives in 1967, the poetry of Pritish Nandi, Tonight This Savage Right, etc. His verse gives the impression of wild energy and verbal belligerence, and his imagination seems to be obsessed with urban violence and horror, death and sex. Prose poetry is the most characteristic forms of Nandi. Then next important writer is Arun Kolatkar. He is a bilingual who writes both in Marathi and English. He has won the Commonwealth Poetry Prize for his long poem Jejuri in 1976, which was written in 1976. He discloses the surrealistic similarities between an ossified Hindu religious tradition and an equally rigid scientific civilization. He is generally skeptical and ironic in his writing. He has a real mastery of the language, and there is the stir of uneasy life in his work. Then he has a singular poetic voice which finds expression in 2 languages, that is, as I said earlier, both in English and Marathi. Kala Goda poems are relaxed in manner. His Jejuri and Kala Goda poems are relaxed in manner. Then Kolatka's drone, which translates as leaf cups, reverts to the spectrum of serious irony in its oblique perspective on the Ramayana. And in short, he has been seen for a long time as an avant-garde experimentalist. Okay. Next, let's talk about Dilip Chitre, who is also a bilingual poet who lived from 1938 to 2009. He is a translator, a teacher, a painter, and filmmaker, and a magazine columnist. His literary output in both languages are sizable, means he didn't write much. Then his versatile creative practice extends to painting and filmmaking as well. Then the major themes discussed by him are exile, alienation, self disintegration, and death. His first collection of Marathi poetry is Kavita, 1960. He also won Sahitya Akademi Award in 1994. Then his poems are mostly autobiographical in nature and they reflect the continuing crisis of his inner life. He writes in the modernist symbolist mode. Then his major works are Traveling in a Cage, Says Tukha, which is translated from Marathi into English. Then Shesha is an important collection that is which came up in 2007. It's translations from Marathi. As is Where is another important collection, a book of new and selected poems in English. In short, he has a greater tendency towards obscurity of language. He uses such words and symbols that can be interpreted at various levels. So, this is all about Dilip Chitre. Next important writer is Agha Shahid Ali. Um, he is a Kashmiri writer who lived in the US. He died very early in 2001. He has written some ghazals named "Call Me Ismail" is one among them, and he also has written famous collections like Half an Inch. He has been critically acclaimed both in America and internationally, and his works has been translated into several languages, including Italian, Hebrew, Kashmiri, and Urdu. Shahid was very clear about his identity as a poet. He described his voice as, I quote, deeply rooted and yet cosmopolitan, unquote. He considered himself the first and foremost poet in the English language. Now, without the desire to represent India to the West, he could write in English with an inwardness about the immense resource that the subcontinent offered, that is, India offered. He published two books of poetry with Writers' Workshop, Calcutta. One is Born Sculpture in 1972, and the second one is In Memory of Begum Akhtar in 1975. Now, Agha Ali's themes of exile, loss, nostalgia, and his political concerns are expressed largely through an engagement with history and memory. So, his themes are expressed through an engagement with history and memory. He thought that, I quote, history is a way of recovering and enriching one's memory, of nourishing, strengthening, and making it be something more than just a very private, simple affair. I unquote. So Shahid called himself a triple exile or a multiple exile, but his self-description and exile was in his words, a self-myth-making poet. In the readers finds in his poetry a multiplicity of belonging, a fascination with his environment, a reaching towards the universal through the local and personal. This is all about Agha Shahid Ali, who is a diaspora writer. Next is Vijay Nambishan. He is a Keralite. He is a poet, writer, critic, and journalist of Indian writing in English. He won the first prize in the first ever All India Poetry Competition in 1990, organized by the Poetry Society India in collaboration with the British Council. He is the co-author of the poetry book Gemini with G. Tayal and Domaris. He is known for his books Language as an Ethnic. He was a reclusive, outstanding poet. Next important writer is Kamala Das. Um, I know you all are very familiar with Kamala Das, so um, I needn't delve too much into her life. The most outstanding among the post-independence women poets. She writes both in English and Malayalam. She is a bilingual. She wrote a lot about post-coloniality. She's not only a post-colonial writer, but also a confessional poet, feminist, and a bilingual, as I said earlier. She has presented the pain and suffering of a woman and the reality of life. Her autobiography, My Story, is written in a very powerful and bold style. Her own disgust and failure have led her to a frantic search of the mythic Krishna, the ideal lover, to establish eternal bond. There is emotional intensity, mastery of phrase, and control over rhythm in her language. She later was converted to Islam and she was called Kamala Suraya. Her major collections are Summer in Calcutta, The Descendants, The Old Playhouse and Other Poems, the Annamalai Poems, Only the Soul Knows How to Sing, Ya Allah, etc. Now, this is a brief survey of Kamala Das. Next, let's talk about Meena Alexander. She is a Malayali writer, uh, hybrid in her identity as she is Malayali Syrian Christian who lived in Allahabad, later in Sudan, and then lived in New York. Later, she died in 2018. She is known for her lyrical writing of immigrant experiences, and sometimes she writes very violent experiences of the border as well. Now, Malayalam is Meena Alexander's native tongue. Other languages such as Hindi or Arabic or French have blended with the mother tongue spoken at home as she was migrating from one place to the other. Her poetry is a complex interweaving of the Indian and immigrant experiences. Her poetry emerges out of the consciousness of hanging between two worlds, between memory and present experiences. She is a poet with strong political and social awareness and writes about multiple facets of violence, including colonial violence, war, state oppression, riots, cultural terrorism, September 11 attacks, religious violence, and partition, etc. Now, major themes which you could find in her poetry are diasporic consciousness, which include exile and loss, migration and creation, memories of people and past, search of home and place, quest for identity, etc. And also, you could see feminist consciousness in her writings, especially of motherhood, protective feminine principle, etc. And also violence and terrorism, as we mentioned earlier. Uh, Her work Illiterate Heart, Where Translations Perish, which was published in 2002, won PEN Faulkner Foundation Open Book Award. And some of her major collections, poetry collections, are The Bird's Bright Ring, her first volume of poetry in 1979, and some other works are I Wrote My Name, A House of Thousand Doors, Rose Silk, etc. And she has written a novel, Nampalli Road, in 1991. And she has got a memoir to her credit, that is Fault Lines, in 1993. And her collections of essays and poems like The Shock of Arrival, Reflections or Post-Colonial Experiences, 1996. Now, when you talk about Meena Alexander, a mention of Sujata Bhatt and Imtiaz Darkar is mandatory. because these three contemporary women poets' achievements represent the fruition of Indian poetry in diaspora. And as you all know, Alexander, Bhatt, and Darkar were born in the 1950s, in the generation immediately following independence. Now, Alexander and Sujata Bhatt were born in India, while Darkar was born in Pakistan. Meena Alexander crossed the Indian Ocean for Sudan at the time of her fifth birthday, while Butt moved to the United States, and Darker's family immigrated to to Scotland when she was only a year old. These experiences of multiple border crossings and the sedimentation of various languages in their poetic works establishes a basic kinship between these poets or among these poets. Now, Imtiaz Darker's bilingual sensibility was shaped by her encounter with English in Scotland and her exposure to Urdu as the language of her home, or as you all know, it's her mother tongue. Her explorations of gender and justice in her poetry occur within the context of her relationship to her religion of Islam. She is passionate in expressing her moral outrage against the excess of Orthodox Islam. Now, let's conclude by saying that South Asian poets in diaspora whose poems map complex relationships with their mother tongues, languages of colonial inheritance, and languages of myriad spaces they have inhabited. Alexander, Bhatt, and Darkar are poets who grew up steeped in the traditions of their regional Indian languages, like Malayalam, Gujarati, and Urdu, respectively. So, when you mention about Meena Alexander, Sujata Bhatt, and Imtiaz Darkars, you should talk about them also because these trio form a diasporic writer. Now let's see who is Meena Kandasamy. She was born in 1984 in Chennai. She is a daughter of a mixed caste Tamil marriage. Uh, she struggled for social justice through her poetry, translation, fiction, and essays. She devolved her anger at India's very rigid caste system and even at the exclusion of women from the forefront. And she has published two collections of poetry, Touch in 2006, which is about caste, and Miss Militancy in 2010, which is a feminist retelling, and these she wrote in her 20s. Now her collection of fictions or her fictions are The Gypsy Goddesses in 2014, which is her first novel. When I Hit You was written in 2017, inspired from her broken marriage. This was misread as a memoir, but actually it's not a memoir. Then Exquisite Cadavers, which was published in 2019 as an experimental fiction. Then she was shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction in 2018. Also received a Pen Translates Award for her translations of Salma's Manamiyangal Women Dream. Her works has appeared in 18 languages and she presently lives in East London. Now with this we come to the end of Meena Kandasamy. Now these are the list of some female voices worth mentioning, which starts from Monika Verma, Gauri Deshpande, Mamta Kalia, Suniti Namjoshi, Tilottama Rajan, Sujata Bhatt, and others. And also there are some male poets worth mentioning like Deb Kumar Das, Paul Jacobs, S.C. Saha, S. Mukashi Punekar, K.D. Katrak, Suresh Kohli, O.P. Patnakar, K. Raghavendra Rao, and others. So apart from these writers, there are several other writers or poets who are worth mentioning, but we haven't included them in this session because of the time limit. Okay, now let's conclude by stating that poetry of this era has a new note and new urgency of utterance, which has deviated entirely from the traditions. And poetry of this era is a coalescence of tradition and modernity. And poets of this age deal with the concrete experiences of men living in this modern world through the innovative use of diction and bold experiments with poetic modes. The post independence Indian English poets have infused new blood into their poetry. Now, the poets of this era are mostly concerned with themselves and their surroundings, so their poetry is in its essence an attempt to see man and his world as they really are without veils and pretenses. Now, let's wind up this session with Bruce King's words. The only answer to those who claimed that Indians could not write authentic poetry in English in which they had been educated was to write poetry as good as that of British, American, and Irish poets, but to write it about Indian lives and conditions. So, this quote by Bruce King exactly states what is Indian writing in English. So, Indian writing in English is a genre or is a genre which talks about Indian lives and conditions, and that too in English. So, in short, we can say that Indian writing in English is in par with other literatures of the world, whether it is British literature or American literature or Irish literature or whatever it is. So, Indian English literature is having a dominant place among the literatures of the world. It's clearly stated here. Okay, with that, we come to the end of this session. Thank you.